Hi, I'm Colin. Welcome to Learn Somatics. Today's video, I'm going to show you how to improve coordination from shoulder to opposite hip across the front of the body and across the back of the body also. This is going to make your back and your front feel much more comfortable, and it's also going to improve your walking pattern as well. All right, let's get started. So working position for this movement is on your back, knees bent, feet flat. You're going to have your hands on your hips. All right, so to begin, just begin to pick up the left shoulder up into the air like so. Just notice what that feels like in the front of the chest, back of the shoulder, and into the belly even. And then slowly let that come down. And when you're ready, we're going to repeat that, lifting up the shoulder, and just let your back flatten out a little bit as you do that. And you might find your head wants to turn towards that left side. And then slowly relax back to rest. And let's do that one more time, picking up the shoulder, letting the head turn to the left, and letting the back flatten out a little bit. And then slowly relax to rest. Now from here, bring your attention to the front of the right hip, and you're just going to do the same thing here. You're going to just pick up the right hip a little towards the ceiling. And you have to ask yourself, how do I do that? And you have to let your back flatten a little bit and let your hip roll a little bit to the left. You might even find this makes your head tip a little bit left as well. And then slowly release. And then when you're ready, let's repeat that. Just sort of scooping that right hip up into the air a little bit, flattening out the back, letting the head turn a little left. And let's repeat that one more time. Just lifting that right hip up. Use your fingers on your hips to feel what's happening. Head turns a little left, back rounds out, and your left hip sinks down. And then slowly release. Okay, let's put those two actions together now. The action of lifting the shoulder toward the ceiling and the opposite hip. So let's go the shoulder first, get that up. And now let's add the right hip lifting up. And it's almost like you're drawing those 2 points together. And then slowly let that relax back to rest. So we're establishing or re-establishing these diagonals across the front of the body. And you're ready. Let the left shoulder pick up, right hip picks up. And use your free hand to feel across. It creates tension across the front of the body. You're just joining those points across the front of your body. And then slowly release. And do that 2 more times, lifting the hip and the opposite shoulder, left shoulder and right hip in this case, up in the air. The back is rounding out. Let the head just go along for the ride and then slowly release. And let's do that one more time. If you imagine like a drawstring between your left shoulder and right hip, that's pulling them together. And then slowly release. Now, a couple of times, let's do the opposite of that movement. Let's press our left shoulder down into the ground and our right hip down into the ground. You'll notice this makes your back arch. It's the opposite movement. And then slowly relax to rest. Actually, just let your hands rest down for this one. Press the left shoulder down, press the right hip down. Feel how it creates an arch on the diagonal, and then slowly release. And do that one more time, pressing the left shoulder down and the back of the right hip down, arching on the diagonal, and then slowly release. Okay, so we now know we can go up and down with the hip and up and down with the shoulder. Let's alternate between those two positions. So we're going to press down with the hip and shoulder, like so, creating that arch on the diagonal. Slowly release, and we're going to scoop up with the hip and shoulder. And your head will tend to tip back, maybe tip a little bit to one side, that's okay. Slowly release. Shoulder and opposite hip press down. Slowly release, shoulder and opposite hip, scoop up. And it's almost a squirming or type action. We're getting good control of these diagonals. One across the front when the hip and shoulder lift up, and on the diagonal across the back when the hip and shoulder press down. And go back and forth like this a few times and see if you can make it feel smooth and easy. And notice as you do it, when you scoop the shoulder and hip up, the ribs sink down, get tension in the front. And when you press the hip and shoulder down into the floor, the ribs pick up, and the tension in the back. Okay, let's do one more of those, each direction. And then slowly relax to rest. All right, so we've done one diagonal there. Let's lay out flat and see how that feels. So if you've done that slowly and carefully, that should feel quite different across the diagonal from left shoulder to right hip, front and back should feel different. You might find your right leg feels a little more relaxed, a little more flopped out, and your left arm also, and possibly even into one side of your neck. But just notice what you feel that's different between one diagonal to the other. And we're going to carry on now and do the other side. So bend the legs again, pop the two hands on the hips, and this time we're going to begin with our right shoulder. So we're going to just scoop our right shoulder up into the air like so. Again, let the head go along for the ride, let it tip wherever it wants to go when you scoop that shoulder up, and then slowly come down. Again, as you scoop the right shoulder up, let your head kind of tip to the right. The back rounds out, create that little bit of tension across the front of the body, and slowly release. And let's just do that about 2 more times. Scoop on that right shoulder up into the air, head turns right, back flattens out. And then slowly relax. It's like a woe is me type action. Shoulder up, back rounds out, head tips to the right, and relax. Okay, let's bring our attention to the front of that left hip, and we're going to scoop the left hip into the air, letting the back round out again. So the low back kind of presses down into the ground a little bit. Left hip scoops up, right hip sinks down, and then slowly release. Notice now if these feel different on this side compared to what you had on the first side. Again, gently picking that left hip up, letting the back round. And try not to do it by pressing through your feet. Try and make the effort come out of your trunk. So you feel it in your belly, mostly, a little bit into the ribs and that in the front. But you feel it in the front of your trunk. And then slowly come down. And let's just do that one more time. Scooping that left hip up into the air by rounding out our back and tipping our pelvis a little to the right. That's what gets the left hip up into the air. And then slowly relax. All right, let's do a couple of repetitions where we join the shoulder and hip actions together. So begin by scooping the right shoulder up, head tips to the right, and then flatten out the back and scoop that left hip up towards the ceiling a little bit as well, and then slowly come down. Again, if you use that visual of like a drawstring between your shoulder and your opposite hip, and it's drawing the 2 points together, and then slowly relaxing down. And again, shoulder scoops up, left hip scoops up. That's our boat shape. And then slowly release. And scoop that shoulder up again. Head tips, let the left shoulder scoop up. Get that nice clear diagonal across the front. And then slowly relax. Let's go in the opposite direction a couple of times. Right shoulder presses down, left hip presses down. Slowly relax. And let's do 3 of those. Creating a bridge between the back of the right shoulder and the left hip. Slowly relax. We're re-establishing the diagonals on the second side now. And lastly, pressing down with that shoulder, right side, left hip, and then slowly release. All right, so we know we can go in both directions. Let's alternate briefly a few times. Press down with the right shoulder and left hip, and then lift up the right shoulder and left hip. And notice how the middle of your body has to do the opposite now to bring them up compared to what it did to press them down. When you press the right shoulder and left hip down, you have to arch. And when you lift the right shoulder and left hip up, you have to round out your back on the diagonal. And just let your head go along for the ride on this. Do a couple of repetitions. pressing down, back arches, pressing up, shoulder and opposite hip, the back rounds. And let's do like 2 more of those. Pressing down. Just know what it feels like. Can you coordinate this and make it smooth? Interesting movements. Last time, pressing down. And then slowly picking on up, left hip, right shoulder. And then come to rest. Okay. Lay out flat, see what you got. If you've done that slowly and carefully, that should feel quite comfortable through the back of your body, through the front, and it should have increased your awareness of those diagonals from shoulder to opposite hip. All right, let's do one last little permutation on this. So bend the legs again. And let's let the arms lay flat for this one. So we're going to alternate between the diagonals. So we're going to start left shoulder down, right hip down, arching. Left shoulder up, right hip up, rounding. Come to rest. Right shoulder back, left hip back, arching. Right shoulder up, left hip up, rounding. And then come to rest. And let's go back to that other diagonal. So arching across the back, left to right. Rounding across the front, left to right. Arching across the back, right to left. So right shoulder down, left hip down. Rounding across the front, right shoulder to left hip. So we're just alternating between the 2 sides each time. And this gives you a chance to kind of compare the 2 sides. So left shoulder pressing down, right hip pressing down, the back arching. Left shoulder picking up, right shoulder picking up, rounding across the front. Pressing the right shoulder down and the left hip down, arching, lifting the right shoulder up, lifting the left hip up, rounding. Again, let your head go along for the ride on this, and just go back and forth like that, like 2 more times. See if you can make it feel somewhat coordinated and smooth. Last one. And pressing that right shoulder back, left hip down, and then scooping them up. Okay, and forget about it. So lay out flat and see how that feels. If you've done that slowly and carefully, you should be feeling quite a bit more comfortable through the entire back of your body. The hips and shoulders should also feel quite flat and planted on the ground. So that's a nice exploration movement to improve the coordination of the diagonals, front and back, shoulder to hip. Hope you found that useful. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.